Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Wiafe, and I'm a board member of the California Forward Action Fund and a member of California Forward's Young Leaders Advisory Council. The California Forward Young Leaders Advisory Council is composed of Californians aged 16 to 24 from diverse backgrounds who are committed to intergenerational collaboration and engaging underrepresented communities with the policymaking process through personal narratives and database recommendations. Some of our work includes legislative input and engagement, policy discussions and proposals, and of course, engaging and providing young voices in the annual California Economic Summit hosted by California Forward. But why are we here today? We're here because we recognize that as young people, we need to harness our power and passion to turn it into concrete action and change. Last year, we saw record voter engagement for young people in the 2020 election. But then we have to think about what conditions created that. Well, for one, we were and are still battling the global pandemic. We had a historic summer as many people were taking to the streets in protest, expressing their ideals and beliefs, but many of us saw our skies glowing orange. Some, like myself, did not have a normal graduation celebrating accomplishments, and others were facing the pandemic-induced recession and struggling to find ways to keep food on the table. Young people had energy and very tangible reasons to go out and express their thoughts through civic engagement and at the ballot box. But the conditions are not exactly the same this time around. First, it's a special election coming up on September 14th, where young people are hardly the target population in voter engagement campaigns. While we have dedicated and trusted organizers and communities up and down the state, ensuring that we have not lost the momentum, we also need to take the reins ourselves. As young people spread information to our peers and ensure that the energy that we saw last year is not lost, but is enhanced. Each of us have a different reason for why we think it's important to vote. I encourage you to think about yours as we hear from our speakers today and engage in discussion a little bit later. For some, it might be the unwavering love of this country and what democracy symbolizes. For others, it might be issue-based. There might be one or a few things that influence your life very heavily and that you might want to ensure that you have an influence over. Or you might be someone like me, an immigrant who knows what it's like to not be able to vote in an election while still being forced to face the repercussions. To that point, it's important today that we not only focus on registration, but also on engagement. Being civically engaged does not only happen when it's time to vote, it also happens with every legislative proposal at all levels of government. It happens when you email or call your elected official with your thoughts. And so to those who are unable to vote for one reason or another, know that your voice is powerful and can also be utilized in other ways, and sometimes more powerful ways. My hope today is that, and our hope today is that our reach with this event extends further than our grasp, that all of you are able to share the information that you learn with your peers and increase the energy around this. Young people need to be part of the conversation, and that starts with ensuring our voices are at the table, or in this case, the ballot box. As we start to turn to our first speaker, Tamara Raspberry, Deputy Secretary of State, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to get to them during the Q&A section of the program. Tamara has had a long career in advocacy, policy, and public service, whether in the Office of Secretary of State, Sempra Energy, the California State Council of Service Employees, or in the Capitol. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, so we're lucky to have her with us today, along with other colleagues from the Secretary of State's office and young leaders speaking right after. Without further delay, thank you for joining us, Tamara.
Great, thank you, Michael. How are you all today? I just wanted to, can someone bring up the presentation? I can't see it. Great, thank you. And I wanted to give you all a page-turning, show-stopping, breathtaking overview of the recall process. And of course, I say that in jest because, as you can see, there's not much excitement behind how a recall comes to be. There's a lot of statutes. It doesn't happen very often. So our last recall was in 2003. And so it takes quite a lot of time and effort and an incredible amount of resources, financial and you know, just by staffing otherwise, to make sure that a statewide recall happens and follows all the rules. So next slide. So to begin, the proponents of a recall have to file a notice of intention with the Secretary of State's office. And so the recall that we're experiencing now actually started last year in June 10th of 2020, when the proponents first introduced the intent to start the proceedings to recall the governor, Gavin Newsom. And so, right, we've all followed what the politics were behind that, so I won't get into that. But I just wanted to give you some background on just what a complicated process a recall election is. And since 2003, when we have the recall election of Governor Gray Davis until the beginning of the recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom, what we saw, there was a lot of legislative changes happening. And so they had not been tested before. Those changes came in 2018 when a senator from Orange County was being recalled, and the party that he was a member of was in power, and so created some bigger hurdles so that a recall process is much more complicated. And usually you see that after a recall election, whether it be a local recall election or a statewide recall election, then the party that's in power creates some legislative changes to actually either make the process a little bit more difficult or a little clearer, or just, you know, these are some things that went terribly wrong and we didn't know it was going to go wrong until we were in the middle of it. So I expect to see some changes after this recall. Whether it's passes or fails, I think we're going to see some legislative changes from that. So all of this started a very long time ago, June of 2020. Next slide, please. So the proponents have to file the notice of intention. And then the Secretary of State, who is the statewide officer over the recall, has to determine how many signatures are required to make that the proponents have to get. So a recall is actually a voter-driven initiative, and so the proponents have to go out and get signatures of 12%, if you can see here, of the last vote for office. Now, the last vote for office was the presidential election of, well, no, when they started, theirs would have been the election of, the presidential election of 2020. A huge number of votes were cast in that, but they had a long time to get that circulated, and that's usually through paid signature gathering. So if you've ever seen someone say, hey, will you sign my petition? I always check and see, you know, what are you signing? What is it asking? Because that signature gathering is what put this whole recall in motion. And so the signatures have to be gathered from 5 different counties. You can't just get all your signatures from LA County or all of your signatures from the Bay Area or one of the larger counties. You have to do it from 5 counties, so to show that this is a statewide effort, not just concentrated in one county. And counties, the signatures have to come in, like it says here, must be equal to in number at least 1% of the last vote for the office in each of the 5 counties. Next slide. So now that we've established how many votes are needed, now you have to circulate the recall petition. Oh, what I meant to ask in the beginning is if everyone starts getting out their calculator, because we're going to have some math at the end of this, so you can see just really how long it takes for a recall election to happen. So registered voters who are qualified for office, they can sign a recall petition. After the initial signature gathering and has happened, and the Secretary of State has said, okay, now we're going to verify the signatures, there's a window of time where a voter can choose to withdraw their signature from the petition. And so we had that earlier this summer. I think about, it wasn't very many, maybe 1,000 people, voters withdrew their signature And this was one of those policies that were put in place after the 2018 recall election of Senator Josh Newman. Next slide. So now the proponents have started their signature gathering, and now from 160 days from the time that the Secretary of State notifies the proponents that the form and wording of the petition is correct, now they have to go and get all of the, they have to file a petition saying that they have acquired all of the signatures, that 12% threshold. Usually, if you want to make sure that you are meeting the threshold, you calculate at least 10% over, because during that signature verification process, some signatures may be found to be invalid. Maybe the person has since moved. Maybe they're not in the county anymore where they originally signed the petition. So you want to make sure that you get you cover your threshold, plus you give yourself some cushion. So that's 160 days where that process happens. Next slide, please. So you can see how exciting all of this is, right? So the next step is to verify the signatures. And so as exciting as this is, I hope you are still with me. I hope your eyes are still open. But you have 30 days after the recall has been initiated, and every 30 days thereafter for the Secretary of State to determine the number of qualified voters who have signed the recall petition. So every 30 days, they verify the signatures, and they'll say, these are how many signatures that we have so far. Then petitioners go out and get some more. And so every 30 days, they have to report of how many signatures have been gathered. If the Secretary of State determines that the petition has the requisite number of ballot signatures to initiate the recall election, then the Secretary of State notifies the Department of Finance of the results. This is something that was actually not this one, the next one. If the petition doesn't have the signatures that are required, then the Secretary of State tells the counties, keep verifying the signature. So every 30 days, you probably saw these reports at the beginning of the year that the signatures were building up, and they had this many signatures, and they had to get to this many. So if in the first 30 days they don't reach that threshold, the county election officials continue to verify the next batch of signatures every 30 days until they get to the qualified number of required signatures. And then, so we have 30 days, and then we set the clock again, 30 days, set the clock again, 30 days. And then the Department of Finance sort of receives the information from the Secretary of State saying these were the results of the signature verification. And then the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, which is in the Legislative House, they start then their clock to start a 30-day process to review and comment on the signature verification petition. And so that clock started, it was very short in the legislature. They didn't take all of the 30 days for this recall petition, but this is one of the statutes that were added after the 2018 recall of Senator Josh Newman. And next slide, please. So now we have the estimated cost of the election. So I hope you're still with me. As I said, this is such a nail biter, page turner information. So after the Secretary of State has notified the Department of Finance that the number of signatures have been met, then the Department of Finance, which is the financial analysis under the governor's executive office, then they have 30 days to estimate what the cost of the recall shall be. So I think you remember that process happened over June, of May and June, and the Department of Finance came out with a number. It said $134 million is the cost of what this recall election would be. And so then that report is submitted to the governor, the Secretary of State, and then the chairperson of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. Also, this was something that was put in place after the 2018 recall of Senator Josh Newman. And then the Legislative Budget Committee has 30 days to review and comment on the estimate provided to them by the Department of Finance. So the executive branch says, this is how much the election is going to cost. This is all of our analysis. They receive cost estimates from the counties, from the Secretary of State's office. They submit that to the legislature. The legislature then has 30 days to review and comment. That did not happen over 30 days. I think the budget committee took just maybe a week, but they have up to 30 days. So if you're with me, I think we're at I hope someone's keeping count. I have a list here. So I think we're at like the 5th 30 day. Next slide, please. Sorry, I have a bunch of phones going off here. Now, the signatures have been gathered. The cost has been estimated. All that process has happened. Now the Secretary of State and all the officers have to then call the election. So an election to determine whether to recall an officer and to elect a successor, which is we're in the process now, shall be called by the governor and held not less than 60 days to 80 days from the date of certification. So since the governor himself was the subject of the recall, the governor cannot make that call. That actually falls to the Secretary of State. That's actually in the statute. And so, sorry, I have someone at my door. So that's 60 to 80 days. Of course, we didn't take that much time to do. Ours was, I think on the 60th day, they went ahead and called the election. So, and that election actually was called by the lieutenant governor. And so the statute actually designates if the governor is recalled, then the lieutenant governor actually takes the duty of calling the date of the election. So the recall election can be conducted within 180 days from the date of the certification of the signatures. So that very first slide. And so this is the process we're in now. Even though it started in June, once the signatures were validated, then the legislature selected this 180-day process. So it could have happened for another year, but it happened with 180 days. And so we all know that the recall election has been set for September 14th. And then this last bullet point just states that the election shall be treated like any other election. So the recall election has to follow the rules of any other election. So everyone gets whatever the rules were in place for the last election, these are the rules that apply for the next election. So the legislature decided back in February, because we were still in a state of emergency with COVID, that every voter would receive a ballot in the mail. So we followed those rules. Everyone received a ballot in the mail. The process of, you have an election day, the hours are from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. All those ballots are collected. Ballots that have a post date of the election date have 3 days to get 3 days to be processed in the mail and be received by the elections office. And then we have a 30-day canvassing period after that. After that 30 days, then the election is certified. So the normal rules of an election apply to a recall election. Nothing is fast-tracked once that's in place. Next slide, please. And then this slide is just to remind everyone that there's just a couple of more rules I just wanted to let you all know. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the officer sought to be recalled cannot be a candidate to succeed him or herself. So we know that there were social media, we're always monitoring social media to find out what the rumors and misinformation that's going around and trying to counter that. So we know that there were some posts and some rumors and some misunderstanding. I don't think it was anyone trying to be facetious, but I think it was just a misunderstanding of how a recall election happens, but the governor cannot replace himself or herself in a recall. So the governor cannot be a write-in candidate. The governor cannot be a candidate on that second question. And so I hope you all have seen your ballot. If you're registered to vote, you should have your ballot in you should have received your ballot already. But the there's a space for write-in candidates, and 55 days prior to the election, the secretary had certified the names of all those and verified those who submitted their names to be a candidate to replace the governor if the first question on the ballot is successful. On September 4th, the announcement of the certified write-in candidates will become available. So to be a write-in candidate, you still have to be verified that you're eligible to be a candidate for this office. And so those people who have submitted their names to be a write-in candidate are going through the vetting, the certification process now. And on September 4th, the Secretary of State will announce those write-in candidates. The governor cannot be on that list because of this statute here. So I hope you are also with me. I told you this was a nail biter, page turner, cliffhanger process, but this just goes to show you that the recall process is very, very complicated. And because of it's been implemented so few times in California that we don't always, it's not like every other election, it's not common knowledge. And so to fight the misinformation that happens in the gaps of knowledge, I really hope that you'll take the time. You could have a copy of this. This is also on our website. It's called Procedures for Recalling State and Local Officials. This is on the Secretary of State's website. And everything is broken down of what the statute, the corresponding statute is to recall an elected official. Thank you. Oh, is that my last slide? Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't realize I had a last slide. So just real quick, what's on the ballot is do you want the candidate, the officer to be removed from office? Yes or no? The highest number of votes, 50% plus one, wins the first question. If the first question of whether or not you want the governor to be recalled, if that first question gets 50% plus one vote, then the second question of who shall replace the governor, those votes are then tabulated. So and I just want everyone to understand that a recall election is like a special election. It's not a normally scheduled election. So turnout is usually very, very low. So that's why it's so important to get involved, because you can have an officer recalled and then replaced by a new office holder who will have received just a very small fraction of the votes of the electorate. So that's why it's very, very important to participate in this election, whether you're yes on the recall or no on the recall. If you're not participating, then your voice isn't counted. And I know there have been some misunderstandings that, well, if you don't vote in the recall, then you're saying that you're voting no, and that's not the case. You actually have to submit a ballot. Whether you want to vote yes or no, you have to submit a ballot in order for that to be counted. We don't know your thoughts. We can't count your thoughts. Next step, our next slide, please. And this is just a list of some of the successful recall attempts in California history. The first was in 1913 for a state senator. And then the last recall was, like I said, Senator Josh Newman of 2018. Twice or once before has the governor been recalled, and that was Governor Gray Davis. But these are the successful recall attempts. There's actually been like 13 recall attempts, but they were not successful, meaning that the office holder remained in office. Okay, now that's it. That's the page turner. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Feel free to send me an email if you have any follow-up questions, but also all of this is on the Secretary of State's website on our elections page. Back to you, Michael. I've always wanted to say that.
we got the chance to say it. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing such great information. It really was nice to have you from the Secretary of State's office. And continuing with the Secretary of State's office, we have Wendy and Krishni, who are working on the California Students Vote Project and working more on the ground with registering students to vote. So with that, if Wendy and Krishni, thank you for joining us as well, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. And like you mentioned, my name is Krishni Shankar. I'm the Students Vote Project Coordinator here at the Secretary of State's office.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy, and I'm the Students Vote Project Engagement Specialist at the Secretary of State. All right, so we can get started. So we're going to be presenting on youth voting and registration, as well as what the Students Vote Project is doing currently for the 2021 recall election. So can we go to the first slide, please? So importance of youth voter registration. Research has shown that voting is a habit that if begun early can develop lifelong voters. Voting is a powerful way for youth to make their voices heard and to have an impact on issues that affect them and their communities. As we've seen in recent election cycles, votes can be influential and even decisive. Youth ages between 18 and 24 are the least likely of any eligible age group to register to vote and turn out to vote. Even though eligible youth voter turnout increased to 47.4 during the 2020 general election, this is still lower than all other age groups and 20% lower than the statewide average. Lastly, voting is a powerful tool in a democracy, and when not all voices are represented in that democratic process, we fall short of the premise of our democracy, which relies heavily on participation. Next slide, please.
So Wendy and I staffed the California Students Vote Project, which was established in 2016 in partnership with then Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and now Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis, and a handful of nonprofit organizations like Common Cause, CalPERG, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and all 4 of California's major higher education institutions. So that's the UC, the CSU, the ACC, which are the independent universities, and the California community colleges. And since the establishment of Students Vote Project, we have seen a drastic increase in both youth and student voter registration, including an increase of over 300% of California students registered through at least means that we track through the Secretary of State's office. And next slide.
All right, so a little bit about AB 963, which is what codified the Students Vote Project into state law in 2019. So AB 963 secured funding for 2 permanent positions at the SOS. So that's currently me and Krishni, and it also allowed for funding of civic engagement coordinators at the California community colleges, who have the responsibility of making sure that their students are civically engaged throughout the year. The bill also laid out requirements for the CSU and the California community colleges and encourages the UC of, for example, emailing students at the beginning of each academic year of key civic engagement dates, as well as the rest of the listed bullet points. And as part of AB 963, the Secretary of State will continue to share resources and key election information. So we ask that you please share all these resources widely. Next slide, please.
And one of the biggest parts of the California Students Vote Project is the California University and College Ballot Bowl. So this was a competition first launched in 2018, wherein all California colleges and universities are invited to compete to register the most students to vote. So in 2020, we had 4 categories. So that was the largest number of students registered, the largest percentage of the student body registered to vote, the most creative methods to registering students, and then new last year was the most registrations at an on-campus polling place or vote center. So we have those 4 categories, and then we honor each of the institutions. So there's a total of 17 winners overall, including our overall champion. Next slide.
Yes, a little bit more about the Ballot Bowl. So we've had the inaugural Ballot Bowl in 2018, where 46 campuses participated. So a total of 11,000 students registered to vote, which is almost double the amount that registered during the 2014 midterm election. And that year we had Cal Poly SLO become our inaugural champion, and they registered 3,000 students. And then in 2020, we had 95 campuses, which is almost double we had in 2018. So we had over 82,000 students registered to vote, and the overall champion for 2020 was CSU Fullerton, who registered over 2,000 students. Next slide, please.
And speaking of Ballot Bowl, we are actually currently in the midst of a Ballot Bowl competition. We are hosting right now the 2021 Ballot Bowl registration rumble, which launched on Monday, August 2nd, and concludes Election Day, Tuesday, September 14th. So like all previous competitions, all of California's higher education institutions are invited to compete to register the most students to vote. Since this is a special election and it's a little bit of a quicker turnaround, we're just doing 2 categories this time, which is the largest number of students registered to vote, the largest percentage of the student body registered to vote. Next slide.
So I think Krishni,
Sorry. And so the way we count registrations in the Ballot Bowl, we try to be as inclusive as possible. So the easiest way is to use that link. We're also going to share it later in this presentation. It's a specific voter registration link that asks each student what college they're affiliated with, and you're able to just drop in what college you go to. We also count paper registrations. So if you have a voter registration card that you requested specific from the Secretary of State's office, or if you request it from your county elections office and just let us know your affidavit ranges, we'll also count those. And then we also include TurboVote voter registrations. So if your campus uses TurboVote, you're included. And if you use the CA Student Vote website, which is hosted by like CalPERG, Rock the Vote, CSSA, UCSA, if you use that website, you're also already included in the Ballot Bowl.
All right, next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So with that being said, let's get ready to rumble. So we have made resources for student voter education and outreach during the Ballot Bowl, but also as part of the Students Vote Project. So we created a student resource guide specifically for this election that you can visit by going to the link shown in the screen. And you can also find in that link that we have toolkits that explain different questions that we believe students, resonate with students and youth. So for example, we have questions such as, what address can I use to register to vote? Registering to vote as an out-of-state student, am I eligible to vote in California? So international students and elections. And it also outlines what you can do if you miss the online voter registration deadline that is coming up on August 30th. So you want to make sure to be able to participate in this election. We also have these questions in graphic form. So we have the graphic that can become shareable with that information and answers to those questions. So we really want you all to, be informed and also share them on social media. We also have a public Facebook group that we currently keep active. If you search up California Students Vote Project on Facebook, you'd be able to find it and join us. And you'll see there that we post information, and we encourage others to post information regarding the recall. And our most recent outreach tool that isn't on the slide, but it includes engaging youth through Snapchat by putting faces behind the Secretary of State to humanize the hard work that goes into making elections happen, while also providing informative, fun short clips as it relates to the 2021 recall. So if you all can press that follow button at California SOS and see what the Students Vote Project is up to there. And then can I go to the next slide, please? And then another important resource we want to highlight is how to make a plan to vote. So this is also in graphic form, and it also is part of our toolkit that we have on our website and that we share out through with our partners. So number one, update your voter registration online easily by August 30th. So there are 4 different ways that this will count toward the competition. So our unique link that Krishni shared earlier, as well as TurboVote, the CA Student Vote website, and the paper registration. And then step 2 is choose how you will vote. So you can choose voting by mail using a secure ballot drop box or in person. But remember this important information as you make your choice. So if you want to request a vote by mail ballot, do so by September 7th of 2021. And if returning by mail your vote by mail ballot, it must be postmarked on or before September 14th and received by your county elections office no later than September 21st. You can also return your vote by mail ballot in person to your county elections office, any polling place in your county, or a secure ballot drop box before 8 p.m. on September 14th. And step 3, identify when and where you will vote. Voting by mail, so mail your ballot as soon as you complete it. It must be postmarked as mentioned on or before Election Day. And there is also early voting locations that you can vote early, or a drop box that you can visit the link CA earlyvoting.sos.ca.gov or contact your county elections office to see if they offer in your county early voting. And then the last step is to carry out your plan. All right, next slide, please.
Perfect. And our last slide for today, we just wanted to kind of have some interactive elements today. So if you haven't already registered to vote, please take out your phone and scan that QR code or type in that link and just make sure you're updating your voter registration. Like Wendy mentioned, the deadline to easily update your voter registration is this next Monday, the 30th. If you've already done that, maybe you've already received your ballot, maybe you've already turned in your ballot, well then also take out your phone, text your 3 friends, Instagram DM, Snapchat, tweet them, text 3 friends, remind them to register to vote if they haven't already, make sure they have a vote plan, and let's get ready to rumble. Perfect. And then mine and Wendy's contact information is here. So if you have any follow-up questions for us or for Tamara, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you for telling us a little bit about how you're working to get young people out there to vote, especially on college campuses. It just seems like it was yesterday that some of us were on the ground doing the same. In fact, with our next speaker, Stephanie Estrada, who is the community representative and press aide for the Office of the Mayor, Todd Gloria in San Diego, we used to be on the ground at San Diego State registering students to vote. I mean, what a time it was. And to look to the future and see how much of a difference is being made on college campuses and how many students are getting registered to vote. But anyway, Stephanie, thank you for joining us, and please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really just happy to be joined here by Tamara Raspberry, our California Deputy Secretary of State, also Krishni and Wendy, all the work that you all are doing with the Student Votes Project, and then as well, various of my fellow California Forward Young Leaders Advisory Council members. So my name is Stephanie Estrada. I am a member of the Young Leaders Advisory Council. I also have the honor of serving the Mayor of San Diego, Todd Gloria, as a community representative and press aide. Part of my role consists of being a liaison between education and youth, as well as being a community representative for our border communities, and then helping out on our communications and with our Spanish media language. So I'm really glad to be joined here by folks who understand the significance of getting out the vote, but I definitely do appreciate, and I first want to thank the California Secretary of State's Office Student Vote Project for partnering with us to host this event. And I just also want to thank all of our attendees for virtually listening. And so if we can go over to the next slide. Awesome. So some of the topic areas that I'm hoping to review today is just an overview of our local effort to mobilize youth vote, especially within that transitional stage from being a senior in high school to a first-time voter in college. And then also how the role of districts and local civic engagement organizations are incorporated in that. And then as well as lastly, just being able to go over how you can proactively stay engaged in the voter registration process, even if that means having individual organized advocacy, as well as providing some other additional resources. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, partnership is key. So our office launched in the city of San Diego, we launched a voter registration challenge specifically for high school students moving on to college to vote for the very first time. Very similar to what's happening at the state level for College Bowl, except just really targeting transitional age from high school to college. Our office partnered with Inspired to Vote. This is a nonpartisan 501c3 foundation that supports voter registration efforts among high school students. This program is part of a bigger foundation, Project High Hopes, that engages with innovative programs in areas of civic responsibilities. In the past 5 years, they have been able to register more than 88,000 students to get registered to vote. They actually have done this similar registration in Iowa and Kentucky. And so San Diego is really honored to be that third city being able to really partner with this organization. And so part of it is just making sure that we are having a collaborative effort First is just making sure that we engage our principals. I think it's important to make sure that we start at the top with our principals, our school district leaders, superintendents, that they're committed to making sure that students are registered to vote in their own district. And then it comes down to making sure our educators, those focused on the social sciences, that are really talking about history, how to vote, really just making sure that we are integrating this in the classroom head on, specifically for seniors at the high school level. So it is imperative that eligible youth are able to register to vote and make sure their voices are heard at the ballot box. One, we can ensure that we have more informed and active citizens in our members of our community. And this effort is going to be running through the upcoming school year. So we're slated to end Friday, April 29th, 2022, the end of the school year, which is part of that strategic outreach and long-term engagement that we continue to get students involved and active this upcoming recall, but also next year into the next election cycle, and really setting a friendly competition between our campuses. So we were able to actually launch this past week on Monday. It was a great event, and we had a lot of our principals, school district leaders, and students there to launch this award. But I do want to get a little bit into the detail of the award, just to let you all know that this is something that you all can model in your respective communities and local municipalities. So if you can turn the PowerPoint over, please. So the award is a voter registration challenge. It's a road to registration. There are 2 levels, so we do have a gold award. It is if you register 85% of the seniors registered that are eligible in your class. So that is our first award. So whichever campus in this race gets to the 85% threshold first wins that gold award. And so the second one is silver award, which is registering 50% of senior class that are eligible to get registered to vote. And you may wonder why those percentages are 85 and 50. One, because 50 is kind of that average where we usually see most of our high school seniors getting registered to vote, and 85 is that threshold that is really pushing it over the line, and that we see students that are really actively in their classrooms doing registration drives out during lunch and after school. So each student would have to register an Inspire to Vote pledge card, which is what you see on the right side of that PowerPoint. They would have to basically sign up for it, really pledge that I am excited to get registered to vote if I'm not eligible, or I am already registered to vote, but I pledge to get other students registered to vote, or I'm already registered, but I want to continue to get my campus registered. So each school does have to sign this card to basically register for the challenge. And so then Inspire to Vote then follows up and continues interacting with either a school representative, a student lead, to arrange voter registration drives that are student led. So we want to make sure that those who are really encouraging others to get registered to vote are young person to young person, saying this is something that's important for me, and it should be something important for you, because it's important for us in our communities. And so our team does look forward to presenting the award to the winning school next year. As you can see, our logo for this event is called My First Vote. And so just kind of running it back to, what does my first vote mean? What does it mean to you? Everyone has a different story. For example, for me as a college student and first generation student, I did quickly realize that my vote was not only for me, but it was for my parents who were not able to vote. So I quickly became engaged. As Michael mentioned, we were doing voter registration drives at the college level. I wish I was able to do that during my high school level. If I'd known it's something like this, I would have really kept going. But I think part of it is making sure that we're staying active, and this is part of making sure that we intentionally outreach to our students early on, since they're able to pre-register to vote 16, 17, and then into college. And so after doing all those voter registration drives, I actually became a poll worker, which was super, super fun. And now I'm working with the mayor's office within the youth space to really make sure that San Diego is really pushing hard on civic engagement, not only in our region, but really pushing others to do so, which is one of the main reasons why I'm here. And so kind of turning it over to the next slide. And I did just want to provide some tools for success. I think a part of it is, it only takes one person who is dedicated to really getting their peers registered and others registered. So a first step is befriending local experts, coordinating with an organization. In this case, the organization that I partner with was Inspired to Vote. Those who are already doing the work and doing the basically doing that registration in their own communities. Some other organizations are the League of Women Voters, Rock the Vote, when we all vote, and the Voter Participation Center. There are plenty more organizations that there is, but these are some of the top ones that I really think are really good starting places. The second is when we're thinking about who we want to partner with, or whether it is partnering with an elected official or partnering with an organization or a school, thinking about picking the right venue, right? When you do a registration drive, you want to make sure that you are either near transit hubs or neighborhood gathering places where we see a lot of moving parts. Obviously, we want to do this in a very COVID-friendly manner. So wear your mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. But, nonetheless, you all are probably already really good experts in that arena. Some other areas are schools, so high school, community colleges, technical schools, vocational schools, alternative schools. Those are really good areas, and also some community sporting events. I think just thinking about those areas with high traffic crowd volumes, especially making sure that we know who those audience are. If we're thinking about high school, college games, sporting events, I think those would be great places. The next one is also just knowing the law and taking the time to train. I think our partners here, the Student Vote Project, has a wealth of information that you all can really receive there. And there are a lot of different voter registration rules from place to place. And so just make sure that your volunteers or yourself are familiar with the federal and state laws that govern voter registration in your own community, because they do differentiate. And then just be sure to keep registration drives nonpartisan and take the time to practice your registration pitch with your volunteers, making sure that you are being as nonpartisan as possible in your outreach, in your materials, and as well as in your messaging. And then, of course, planning ahead, making sure you rally up your volunteers, event leaders, making sure you have your forms, clipboards, and collection envelopes, banners that say register to vote, pencils and pens, sign-up sheets, or pledge cards, as we just seen with Inspire to Vote, pledge cards, because it really holds folks accountable when you do that. Like, you have them sign a paper, and then they're like, oh, I did that, so now I really gotta follow through and invite others to do so. And then also, of course, any extra forms for any newly registered voters. You'd be surprised how many people you meet that haven't voted before or haven't felt the power in wanting to vote before, especially within our youth. And so a next part of it is just between our outreach, making sure you utilize networks and social media. We just saw our partners from the Student Vote Project doing Snapchats and stuff like that. I think the most intentional outreach and marketing that you can do, the best. And I think another part is also being inclusive in that. Part of my role is making sure that we deliver information and we humanize it, especially for those who don't speak English, that speak Spanish, that speak a different language. So being if you do have the resources, making sure that you're being inclusive in your language. And you can just continue to follow up. So with that pledge card, you'll have their email, you'll have their number, or if you don't have a pledge card, at least have a sign-up sheet where you can stay in contact with them. You can continue, don't always text them. Not everyone wants to hear about voter registration every single day, but maybe some weekly texts, like, hey, how many folks, or whatever you can do in your capacity. And then on election day, if you're bored like me and you really love this space, you become a poll worker. It's fun. You get to learn so much about the voting process, so much about what you can do, can't do the day of, what a conditional ballot is, and so forth. So you learn a lot along the way, and you get compensated while you're at it. So it's a kind of win-win situation there. So yeah, that is really kind of a synopsis of kind of individual organized advocacy and what you can do in your own space. You can do this as young as possible, as old as possible. We have really so many folks that are really dedicated in the civic engagement space. And so kind of moving over to my last slide. So, you know, we have invited you all here today because we know the future of our democracy depends upon the participation of our diverse population, and that includes our young people. So just making sure that we instill the need to vote really shows other young people that their voices do matter in this governing process, especially with the important election cycle coming up. So I did want to just provide a few contacts and resources for you all today. My very good friend, her name's Tammy. She is my contact at Inspire to Vote, and she is always willing to talk to folks that are interested in this process, how you all can even do this in your own communities, and so forth. So I provided her email with her blessing, of course, for you all to connect with her. And also, please feel free to connect with me as well. My email is also on that page. And then if you do want to become a poll worker, please just type in your local county registrar of voters and you can sign right up. So just type in your community, county registrar of voters, and you can also become a poll worker. And then if this is your first time voting, please, I refer to Vote for 411. That has a first time voter checklist and kind of really has like what's on your ballot, all really the information that you have. You all have a lot of support here from our Student Vote Project, from our Women of League Voter, from Inspire to Vote, all these different organizations that really want you all to get to the ballot and get registered to vote. So thank you so much. Please feel free to stay in contact with me. I really do appreciate the time here today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing and telling us all that grateful, awesome information. If we could have all the speakers that just spoke kind of come up for our Q&A portion. We do have some questions that were sent in prior to the event, and I want to remind everyone listening in now that you can ask your question using the Q&A function of the webinar, or you can send it into the chat, or if you're able to, you can send it to me or the panelists individually. Speakers, would you mind joining me? We can start with you, Tamara. From your side, what has been some of the most challenging aspects of executing a recall election?
The misinformation, right? So what we do in our office, especially my team, is we're the outreach coordinators. So we make sure everyone has the information that they need to register to vote, making sure we're outreaching to hard to reach communities, making sure we're connecting with the local county offices of election. But the hardest part is the misinformation. And I find that even in my own networks, my own social and familial networks, that even though I'm always talking about voting and elections, you know, when there's not an election, just because that's my passion, I found that my own network is misinformed. And these are people who vote a lot, who vote every election, people who are in politics themselves, like really didn't understand how a recall works. So, and like I said before, when there's gaps in knowledge, then rumors and misinformation and conspiracies are really easy to fill in those gaps. So I always say, you know, once you've heard my spiel, or if you've ever been in the room with the secretary, once you've heard her talk about elections and the recall and why it's so important, we consider you have been deputized. And so now you take this information and you combat the misinformation when you see it. Just stop it. I mean, someone could post something and it gets 30,000, 40,000 likes and 20,000 retweets before we even see it and can stop it. And so that's why forums like this are so important, so everyone has the right information, especially for first-time voters. I was here, I was around, you know, I'm of a certain age, I was around for the first gubernatorial recall in 2003. Many of you were not. I mean, you were around, but you probably weren't paying attention. And so for some of you, this may actually be your first time voting. Maybe you weren't 18 last year, so this is your first time voting. So this ballot looks very different than other ballots. This election is very different from other elections, so you just have to have the information. And a lot of it's right there at our Secretary of State website.
And you heard it here first. Since everyone that stayed this far got the correct information, it's now your job to combat misinformation. Thank you for that response. Stephanie, we'll go to you. What do you think other jurisdictions can learn from what's happening in San Diego? And what are your main challenges in this work?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for that. And I think one of the biggest challenges is, one, making sure we get folks like really empowered to vote. I think we think about the events when your opening statement, you were thinking about the events that have happened in the past year. So some students, some young members may feel, what is the power in voting? And I think it's part of reinstilling that, really saying, your vote really reflects your education system. It reflects the streets that your parents live on. It reflects every part of the quality of life that you really live on, because part of, I think, the perspective that I have working for a local government is that we really deal with the day-to-day aspect of things. And I think part of it is showing that not only do you have a say in who's your leadership, but you have a say in how funding is allocated in specific areas, or how how education systems are built in a specific area, and so forth. So I think part of it is making sure we really we synthesize the information in a way that's digestible and understandable, but folks that really see that it's meaningful and the process is meaningful.
Thanks, Stephanie. Sorry, it took me a while to find that mute button. We actually had a question sent in from one of the listeners today, and I don't know who the best person to answer this would be. I imagine it might be Tamara, but Krishni and Wendy, maybe feel free to hop in as well. If the results are within a close percentage, can the recall go through an audit afterwards, or how does that work?
So, like I said, the rules of the recall, the conduction of the election, follow all the other rules of the election. So a vote actually has to be like within 1%, and then that's an automatic recount with audited paper ballot auditing and that whole spiel. If a candidate wants to challenge a recall, the outcome with a recount, they have to pay for it. It's not automatic. So the 1% automatically triggers it. Anything else, if 1,000 people turn in their ballot, I mean, I think we're about like almost 450,000 people have returned their ballot. So let's just say those are the final numbers, like those are all the people that are going to vote. Whoever was 50% plus one, that plus one, that's not 1%, that's one vote. That counts, and then that's the winner.
Awesome, thank you. And I recognize that we're at time and we're going to go over just a little bit, if that's okay with all of you. Final question for everyone, if you wouldn't mind answering briefly. For each of you, what's your personal reason for voting? Or if you don't, for some reason don't want to share that, or for whatever reason, what's a compelling reason to vote? Wendy, would you mind getting us started, and then we'll go to Krishni.
Yeah, of course. So I always think that youth is the future. So kind of being part of that demographic of the 18 to 25-year-old, I think it's important to lead by example and really show that we are California's future leaders.
And was I next?
Yeah.
I think for me, so I was really lucky. So I am the daughter of two immigrants, and they became citizens when I was really little. And since they became citizens, they voted in each and every election they've been able to. So they really raised me with that mindset of civic engagement and being involved in our community, because my parents are such great community leaders. So once I turned 18, I voted in every single election, because it really is a way for you to have an impact on what is directly happening in your, not just your state and your nation, but also just like local initiatives. Like you're having a say in like the playgrounds and libraries and things like that that are being built.
Thank you for sharing. Stephanie?
Thanks, Michael. I would say part of the reason of me voting has shifted throughout my career. I think first it felt like it's what I had to do as soon as I turned 18. Let's get registered to vote. I mean, it was everywhere. So one, I think my first purpose was like, okay, I have to do this. I have the ability to do this, the privilege to do this, just like Krishni mentioned, coming from an immigrant background, we know how heavy, how much weight that vote has. And I think that's where I came from. And now kind of shifting into the space where I'm really working within these efforts, and especially from, being in public service and being a young professional, I realized that throughout even just working in campaigns, how important it is to make sure that we get folks really that are with the right intention of the community, with feedback from the community head on, and knowing what the community wants to really get elected. So kind of being in that position of campaigning and asking people to vote for my boss now, Mayor Todd Gloria, was then like, vote this person, and just really setting that message. And now being in the administration, I realized how much power there is in what initiatives we get really pushed out there. And I think there's a power in that, right? And I think now for me, me voting just means that, one, I'm ensuring that I'm keeping myself informed and being active, but I'm also being a part of that, being proactive and really pushing those initiatives that are kind of trailblazers, that are really putting forward policies that we haven't seen before. And that's largely because of the voters who voted for folks to get in office that can really get the work done. So I think now, for me, I'm that person now that's like, please vote, register to vote. It's so important. And I went from like, oh, I have to vote, to like, now this is like my day in, day out, and I want other people to do it just because I've seen the transformation it's done for my life. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's been more of a journey.
Thank you so much for outlining that for us. And Tamara, please take us home.
So my grandmother lived to be over 100 years old. She died just short of 101. She was born in 1909. So she remembers when women got the right to vote, but it didn't apply to her mom, didn't apply to women in her family because we're African American. And so my family are the direct beneficiaries of the Civil Rights Act, and the blood, literally the blood that was shed in order to gain access to something as, a simple right that you have as an American to vote. And so those were Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas. Those were the discussions we had. It was always about politics. It was always about voting. My parents would take my sister and I to the polls when we were little, and I just couldn't. And that was back in the day. We had to punch it with a little needle. You had to punch the paper. And I was so excited. So the first time I voted, I was actually a student away at college at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. So my mother mailed me my ballot because, it wasn't as easy just to get it. So my mother mailed my ballot to me. And I remember sitting in my dorm room and punching my little ballot. And I felt like I was 18, I was in college, but I was an adult now. And I had a voice in the process because I came from a lineage of people who built this country, who were in this country and did not have a right to vote because they were paying taxes, they were part of the community, but because of their race, they were denied this fundamental right. So I look at it as my legacy, and I'm not gonna let anyone take that away from me. And so I pass it on to my children. You see their pictures right here. And I take, even though I'm an absentee voter, I take my ballot down to the county office. They get their stickers, they wave the flags, and I take them with me on when I go to polling observation. So it's such a part of my being, and you hear my voice, I get excited when I talk about it, that I just can't imagine that being taken away from me. And so I made it my career to let other people know, especially young people, especially people of color, young people of color, that look, this is your right, and don't let anyone take this voice away from you. Jeff Bezos has one vote, right? So, and you have one vote. So your vote, Jeff Bezos, think of all the billionaires, right? Their votes aren't worth any more than yours. If you're 18 years old, a citizen of the United States, you have a vote. Don't let anyone else take that voice away from you.
Thank you so much for that, and thank all of you for coming and spending your time with us. We do have a little bit more activity for the attendees, but speakers, your time was invaluable. And I also have my ballot right here, so I'm ready to crack it open and get moving right after this event. But again, thank you so much. Max, would you like to tell us what's going on next?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Can you all hear me? Yes, fantastic. Okay, everybody. So you all got to hear from our incredible speakers today. You got to hear about the process that goes into creating a recall and the unique situation that we find ourselves in right now. You've heard about how important it is that you continue to interact and how you continue to represent the youth population, and how you see that we're growing, we're slowly becoming to build momentum towards what we're trying to achieve, but we're not quite there yet, but we're not going to stop now. And then you got to hear about how the education system and our school systems are so vital towards empowering voter registration and getting the youth vote out there and using what we have available to us at that time. So what I want to ask is, what are you going to do with all this information now? Because it's incredible that you're here and that you chose to participate and be a part of what we have going on today. But don't just take this information and sit with it. We're sharing all of this with you so that you go out and you impact all of your friends and peers and colleagues that aren't here this evening. You clearly have a vested interest in the recall election and voter registration and youth vote engagement. But go ahead and take that information and take that passion that you have and share it with others, because that's how we as young advocates are going to be able to continuously leave an impact on our society, on our state, and what we have going on. So please take this information, take the the location of where you can vote, how to vote, getting registered, and go and participate in these university-based and school-based programs that we have that allow us to work hard towards increasing voter registration. So I just hope that you all take that with you, and that you will go and spread that information out and share it with all of your colleagues and friends, and continue to grow your youth advocacy network. Speaking of growing youth advocacy networks, one of the things that we have going on right now is we have the opportunity to expand our youth advocacy network in a group Zoom session. We want to be able to give the opportunity for discussion-based work and for collaboration to occur in a Zoom setting right now with all of our participants throughout the state of California. So we're going to have this Zoom link dropped into the chat box right here. And once you click on that Zoom link that's just been entered in, we're going to transition over into a Zoom room. We're going to be able to discuss the impact of both the recall election and voter registration as a whole. So please feel free, join us, and continue to advocate and express your interest in what we have going on here today, and take this information and go and share it with others. So we hope to see you there. Thank you again for participating today. Thank you to all of our incredible speakers and organizers, and thank you to our attendees. And I hope to see you right after this. But thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you in just a minute.